Moments to go. The painter's got it to the jockey. Jockey to stockbroker. Oh, intercepted by the rug salesman. Oh, rug salesman under pressure to the postman. The postman dispatches a high ball to the chef. Oh, chef drills the dentist. The Ricky flies. One straight Moby Dick will win it. Sharker. The baker picks up the crumbs. Baker to Carpenter. The Carpenter hammers through the tall timber. It's all over Red Rover.
End of the game. It's the quest. End of the game.
Who cares?
End of the day. It's the West. End of the day.
In many countries of the world, voting is not compulsory.
I wouldn't know who to vote for anyway.
In fact, in some countries, there are no elections.
And what happens if I have to go out?
In many of those countries, people are fighting and dying simply for the right to vote.
I think it's an infringement on my private time.
If you think elections are a waste of time, think what your life would be like without them. Enroll to vote now. It won't kill you.
Where's my Christmas dinner?
I'm taking holiday from the kitchen this year, Dad. Jack's cooking it on the Weber barbecue Santa gave him.
Jack couldn't cook to save himself.
Merry Christmas, Dad.
Yeah.
You look worried.
I'm worried about my Christmas dinner, Dad. I can cook anything on my Weber barbecue.
Fantastic. That looks great, Jack. Marvellous.
What do you reckon, Dad?
It's all right.
Give a Weber barbecue for Christmas. It's the best way to barbecue anything.
To the National Crime Authority, and later this month it's to hold an extraordinary public meeting. The purpose is to discuss the role of the NCA in South Australia, but there's speculation that the occasion will be used to further justify the decision to bury the original Operation Ark report, a report into allegations of police corruption prepared by Justice Stewart. But what is it in this report that the South Australian Government and the current NCA find so objectionable, and why was there 6 months of silence following its completion? Tonight, the 7:30 report will do what the South Australian Government has avoided doing. We'll make public some of its findings using reenactments from the original transcripts in the hope that the Government will be encouraged to publish the report.
You must remember that it's not the NCA versus the Commissioner of Police or the South Australian Police. We are working together to try to come to some recipe which resolves any problem.
The two reports deal with the same issue. The bottom line, right, agreed, at least the agreed basis in both reports, is that there was no corruption or illegality. Now surely that's the important issue.
Despite the reassurances of the Police Commissioner and the Attorney General, the ARC report raises some alarming questions. While there's no finding of corruption or dishonesty, the report is damning of the lack of competence and desire shown by police to investigate themselves. In the words of the report, there's an apparent lack of resolve within certain quarters of the South Australian Police Force to pursue these allegations of corruption with the professionalism and commitment to root out corrupt practices. The most conspicuous example of this lack of resolve was the failure to advise both the NCA and the Police Commissioner of the 13 allegations of police involvement in the drug trade made during last year's Operation Noah campaign. The report focuses on the role played by a number of senior police, including Superintendent David Eason, head of the South Australian Drug Squad, and is a chronicle of incompetence. The unfortunate saga began with last year's Noah phone-in. Over 900 complaints were registered, 13 against police, but of these, only one was correctly logged in the computer, and that complaint referred to a New South Wales police officer. This inaccurate data was later forwarded to the Noah National Coordinators, the Australian Federal Police, without correction. Superintendent Eason collected the 13 complaints and handed them on to the Internal Investigations Branch, but the computer statistics remained incorrect. The first the NCA and the Police Commissioner heard of these complaints was a month later when David Eason revealed them at this press conference.
You've got to expect that it will be reported. Whether they are actually involved is something for the investigation to find out.
Transcripts from the ARC report reveal the NCA's concern about this.
Why did you tell them there were only 5 under investigation?
Because that's what I believed at the time.
How many, in fact, were under investigation? At the time you told the journalists that there were 5.
5 or 6, because some of them have been investigated, some by my people, some by other areas.
But clearly the number was 13, as police records show. At the press conference, Superintendent Eason also stated the complaints were very minor. But according to the NCA's assessment, few, if any, could be properly described as minor. This too appeared to be the opinion of the Police Commissioner, as the report states. The Commissioner declared that he viewed with grave concern allegations of police involvement in serious criminal matters. But what the NCA found more disquieting was that Superintendent Eason made no mention of these allegations when interviewed by the Parliamentary Joint Committee for the NCA just 2 weeks after Noah. The NCA, in their inquiry, reminded him of this oversight.
This is probably a fairly sensitive issue amongst the South Australian police force at the present time, and I refer to the propensity to be corrupted by the enormous money that is in the drug area. Do you find within the force that this is something that worries your officers? Do you remember being asked that question?
Yes.
And you replied as follows, didn't you? I think it is something that is in everybody's mind, and we had a problem 18 months ago that has now been fixed and got over. Do you remember saying that?
Yes.
When was Noah?
7th of February, sir.
About 2 weeks before you gave evidence before the Parliamentary Joint Committee.
Yes, sir.
You knew then, that is to say on the 22nd of February, that there had been some 14 complaints concerning police corruption, didn't you?
There was actually 12 concerning South Australian police, 1 concerning New South Wales, and the other was a inquiry being carried out by the Internal Affairs, which I had some knowledge of.
All right. Nevertheless, you had knowledge, as of the 22nd of February, that there had been 12 complaints from citizens over the telephone in the Noah operation concerning alleged corrupt practices by police.
Yes, sir.
You said at the Parliamentary Joint Committee, didn't you, the following. In fact, I can state with surety that there is no organised corruption in our force. You said that, didn't you?
I remember saying, well, I knew I said something like that, yes.
But Superintendent Eason was not the only one questioned. The NCA also interviewed other senior officers, including the Commissioner, and received conflicting accounts of who was told what and how the information was supposed to pass along the chain of command. The system, it seemed, did not work. It would appear plain on the evidence that the anti-corruption branch was also not advised of the existence of these allegations, despite its acknowledged anti-corruption function and its liaison role with the NCA. The conclusions drawn by the NCA indicate that active dishonesty or corruption played no part in the failure of senior officers to inform the NCA of the Operation Noah allegations. And while this is often quoted, no reference has been made to the following criticism of police conduct: negligence, incompetence and sheer inadvertence. In this regard, the facts speak for themselves. The second half of the ARC report is devoted to an examination of the way police investigated the 13 allegations of corruption. This too is a catalogue of carelessness, apathy and ineptitude. Senior Sergeant Paul Phillips of the Internal Investigations Branch told the NCA that he had treated Operation Noah complaints against police as rubbish. The NCA observed that in 6 cases, poor investigative practices were employed. On 2 occasions, members of the same police station had been asked to investigate their own colleagues, and there was at least 1 case of unquestioned acceptance by the police of a report deemed inadequate by the NCA. The most disturbing example of neglect surrounds the allegations that in a country area, Indian hemp was being grown and harvested with the blessing of a local police officer who was named. This complaint was referred to the head of the drug squad, Superintendent Eason, for investigation. The NCA revealed that no effort was made to trace the officer named. When questioned about this, Superintendent Eason replied,
"We're investigating the crop."
How can you investigate the crop without investigating the police officer, for goodness sake?
Sir, to locate the actual alleged crop.
But the two go together, hand in glove, don't they?
Yes, sir.
Isn't this a ridiculous way to approach the matter?
My idea would be to try and locate the actual alleged crop, and then make inquiries to try and ascertain whether there was a police officer involved in it.
With the greatest respect, Chief Inspector Eason, do you not consider it was pertinent to determine whether there is a police constable by that name in the general area?
To which Superintendent Eason replied, inquiries would have been made, and I would say that my sergeant would know where that officer is. I don't at this stage. When asked by the...
Anything over there? Not that I can see. There's nothing here Gotta be here somewhere.
I'm not one to take unnecessary risks. I've got a lot of future to think about. But you've got to be prepared for it. That's why I got myself into Unity bonds from Manchester Unity. They're capital guaranteed, which is great because I go for safety as well as performance. But the most exciting part is they're tax-free, which means everything I get, I hang on to.
Tax-free Unity bonds from Manchester Unity. Everything you get, you hang on to.
We can offer our services if the unfair treatment happened in education. And the we must mean the Commissioner for Equal Opportunities, so that means she can go there for help.
Why? You're underage.
I'm what?
You're underage?
I bet I'm older than the last lot you just let through.
I'm sorry, sir, but the man reserves the right to refuse entry to anyone that's unsuitable, and you're unsuitable.
It's because it's Aboriginal, isn't it? Well, isn't it?
Come on, you two, what's keeping you?
Come on, David, let's go. It's a crummy dump anyway.
What's going on?
I can't go in. He reckons that I'm underage.
You're joking. Oh, I see. It's because of his colour, isn't it?
I've got no quarrel with you, sir, or the lady. She can go in if she wants, but I'm not going to allow people in that are going to cause trouble. Where your sort are, there's always trouble.
My sort? What do you mean by that?
I think you get my meaning, sir.
Well, I'm not going in without him.
Then don't go in.
I don't think what you're doing is right. We're going to do something about this. David, let's go. John, we're going somewhere else.
Yeah, we'll go as well. Let's go get Cassie.
Great. See you later. Goodbye.
That's what we say. Last time smoke.
What time?
About 9:30.
Oh, sorry, I went out. It's right up my back.
When the second cricket test gets underway in Adelaide next week, one famous Indian won't be appearing. Satirical character Mahatma Kote, otherwise known as former cricketer Greg Ritchie, has cancelled his performance because of concerns spectators might be upset by his jokes.
Greg Ritchie played 30 tests for Australia, with one of his best performances coming against India in 1985 at the Adelaide Oval. Since retiring, Ritchie has gained notoriety as a comedian, particularly in the role of Indian Mahatma Kote. But the act has attracted criticism for having racist undertones. Nevertheless, Ritchie was booked to perform for corporate clients at the Adelaide Test against India next week.
Greg Ritchie's a very... well, he's not a racist in any way, shape or form.
The open corporate enclosure is to be positioned alongside the Bradman stand. Ritchie says when he heard that he would be performing within earshot of spectators in the outer, he insisted the show be cancelled.
The reason why Greg has pulled out is because the situation. He would have never have agreed to it
Richie doesn't believe his character offends and says his skit is in good humour. In fact, Richie considers many of the touring party friends.
The other thing is these people are friends of his. He was out the other night with the manager of the Indian team. They're friends of his. He's just upset by the whole thing.
The corporate client and the Cricket Association have both distanced themselves from the issue. Amy McKay, 10 News.
Well, the first test was certainly no laughing matter for Steve Waugh today. Mark Aston, it didn't go according to script, did it?
Penalised twice by the thieves. As well as the loss of the vehicle, we're often forced to pay more for insurance. For people who inadvertently buy second-hand cars which have been stolen, there's an even greater penalty.
Car theft is extremely prevalent in Australia today. There's a car stolen every few minutes. Some for joyride, some for transport, but many are stolen as part of an organised crime racket. Organised motor vehicle theft is a major national problem. It's frequently undertaken on a large scale, with a huge number of vehicles being processed during the course of a single year. Police suspect that there's a major organised car theft network operating in South Australia, where last year over 15,000 cars were stolen. Of these, approximately 3,000 remain unrecovered, presumably having had their identification altered. At an average value of $10,000 each, this represents a total of $3 million worth of missing cars.
Now, the key to this crime lies in the ability of the thieves to change the vehicle's identification. Once they've transformed the car's details, it can be sold to an unsuspecting buyer who becomes the unfortunate victim in more ways than one.
A late-model crashed vehicle is purchased from a wrecker. Incidentally, they now prefer to be called automotive part recyclers. Legitimate wreckers usually belong to the Automotive Part Recycler Association of Australia Proprietary Limited. This organisation has requested that the law be changed to require official registration of members. Cars targeted for the organised racket are most frequently Commodores and Falcons. Porsches and four-wheel drive vehicles are also purchased. A similar car is then stolen, a process which can take less than 30 seconds. Cars are most often stolen when unprotected by security systems and when parked in high-risk areas. The car is taken to a workshop where identifications are swapped with those from the wreck. The process usually takes place at a workshop set up specifically for the purpose, typically located in an industrial area. The rest of the wreck is then broken down into saleable parts, and the leftovers are sold to scrap metal merchants who further break down the wreckage for recycling before compacting unusable items. The newly identified stolen car is then taken to a vehicle inspection station where its ID is examined, and the new papers are taken to the Motor Registration Division for registration of the vehicle as a rebuilt wreck. Vehicles are usually sold back to the public as legitimate second-hand cars, frequently through classified adverts in the papers. They're usually registered as belonging to friends or family of the operators, and the sale is handled as a private transaction. When the police track down an organised motor vehicle theft operation, they repossess stolen vehicles from innocent members of the public who have bought them in good faith. These people have frequently paid many thousands of dollars for the vehicle and usually receive no compensation. The only claim open to the victim is a civil one against the person who sold the car to them. In the vast majority of cases, the person loses the car plus whatever money they paid for it. The police feel that this type of crime should be very widely publicised, as there are a number of stages in such an operation about which members of the public may be able to give information to the police. For example, someone may notice a person frequently purchasing late-model wrecked cars. Someone may notice a lot of similar cars being processed through a workshop. Someone may have noticed a person frequently visiting a vehicle inspection station.
Really high mileage.
Or perhaps a member of the public has noticed someone selling a lot of second-hand cars. Any of these stages may cause suspicion and should be taken seriously and reported to police.
Bearing in mind, I bought the car in May. It was repossessed by the police in July and it got to court in November. So it was all of those months of waiting and not knowing and trying to make ends meet, sort of thing, because no one in their right mind really can afford to pay twice for one vehicle.
Well, the problem is basically these badly damaged cars are being sold with their ID plates on them, and well, you know, the people can do basically anything with them, can't they?
You've got to fight to get your vehicle back or let it go and just lose that money. You can't claim on your insurance company. It's one exclusion on policies. You can't even get a lawyer to represent you in court. It has to be done by you in person. You know, and it's so degrading to find that you're used by these people that have just got no ethics.
Police around the country have had some success against these gangs. In South Australia, an operation by the Organised Crime Task Force last year recovered more than 150 cars and 51 people were arrested. But the number of cars still disappearing off the streets indicates other gangs are operating. If you have any information about a person or group of people who may be involved in car theft, then these are the numbers. In New South Wales, you should call 008 025 122. In Queensland, the number to call is 008 800 400. In Victoria, two choices, 008 333 000 for outside Melbourne, or in town, 865 5000. In South Australia, the number there is 08 207 5257. And in Western Australia, the hotline is 008 802 111.